The Los Angeles sun was brutal that afternoon. A white, hot glare that baked the asphalt and shimmered in the distance like molten glass. Traffic crawled sluggishly along Interstate 405, horns blaring, radios chattering, the usual weekday chaos. Among the endless stream of vehicles was a beat-up 1998 Honda Civic, its faded red paint dulled by years of relentless sun. The AC had stopped working 3 summers ago, but the man behind the wheel, 29-year-old Marcus Reed, barely noticed. He was used to discomfort. Marcus had just clocked out from a 16-hour overnight shift at a downtown distribution warehouse. His back ached, his hands were sore, and his eyelids felt like lead weights. But rent was due in 3 days, and missing a shift wasn't an option. For Marcus, there were no safety nets. His mother had died 5 years ago from a stroke brought on by overwork, and his younger sister, Alina, was still in high school. Every bill, every meal, every ounce of survival rested on his shoulders. He adjusted the rearview mirror and exhaled slowly, his breath fogging the cracked glass. 2 more months. He muttered under his breath. 2 more months, until he could finish his final night classes at community college. 2 more months until he could apply for that logistics coordinator job that paid triple what he made now. Hope was the only thing that kept his old Civic moving. A mile ahead, a sleek white Bentley, Bentayga sliced through lanes with arrogant speed, ignoring the protests of traffic. Inside, Claire Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Industries, was shouting into her Bluetooth headset, "I don't care what the board says, Evan. The deal closes tonight. If it doesn't, heads will roll." Her voice was calm but sharp, the kind of tone that had built empires and destroyed competitors. At 37, Claire was the youngest CEO of a Fortune 500 company in California. She was ruthless, brilliant, and unbreakable. Or so people said. But beneath the power suits and press releases, Claire was tired too. Tired of boardroom wars. Tired of fake smiles. Tired of pretending that the world didn't hate powerful women, especially powerful women who didn't apologize for winning. As she approached an exit ramp, her phone buzzed with another call. Her father, reminding her of a dinner that evening with the mayor. "Don't forget Claire," he said. "Optics matter. You're not just a CEO. You're a symbol." She rolled her eyes and swerved into the far left lane, barely glancing at the blind spot. It happened in seconds. A shredded truck tire rolled out from beneath a passing semi, bouncing violently across the freeway. Claire barely had time to react before it slammed into her front wheel. The Bentley veered hard left, fishtailed, and flipped twice before crashing into the median with a thunderous explosion of metal and glass. Marcus slammed on his brakes. Time seemed to slow. He watched in disbelief as the luxury SUV skidded upside down, smoke billowing from the hood. Drivers screamed, horns blared, and people grabbed their phones. Some dialing 911, others filming. But Marcus's eyes locked on something they didn't see. Gasoline pooling rapidly beneath the twisted wreckage, snaking across the pavement toward a flickering flame near the engine. "God, no," he whispered, throwing his car into park and sprinting toward the fire. Inside the Bentley, Claire hung upside down, blood dripping from a cut above her brow. The airbags had deployed, the seatbelt refused to release, and the smell of gasoline was suffocating. Her phone was still connected to the Bluetooth. "Claire, Claire, are you there?" Her father's voice echoed uselessly through the speakers. She screamed for help, but her voice was swallowed by the chaos. Marcus reached the driver's side, shielding his face from the heat.
"Ma'am?
"Can you hear me?" he shouted. Through the spiderweb of shattered glass, he saw her. Terrified, disoriented, trapped. "Please," she gasped. "I can't move. The seatbelt." "Hold on," Marcus said, his heart pounding. He wrapped his jacket around his fist and punched through the side window. Glass sliced his forearm, but he barely felt it. The belt was jammed tight, refusing to budge. He pulled out the small utility knife he used to open shipping crates and began sawing frantically. "Stay with me," he said, voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. "What's your name?" "Claire." "I'm Marcus." "I'm going to get you out, Claire. Just look at me." The seatbelt snapped. Claire dropped painfully onto the ceiling of the overturned car. Marcus grabbed her hands, pulling her toward the broken window. She screamed as her shoulder scraped against jagged metal, but he didn't stop. With one final heave, he dragged her free just as the flames reached the gas tank. "Run!" he yelled. They stumbled 20 feet before the Bentley exploded behind them, a deafening roar that threw them both to the ground. Marcus instinctively twisted his body, shielding Claire from the blast. His back hit the pavement hard, pain shooting up his spine, but she was safe. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Claire stared at him, dazed. Her dress was torn, her face streaked with soot, but she was alive. "Yo, you saved me." Paramedics arrived minutes later. Cameras followed, capturing the chaos. Marcus, still bleeding from his arm, backed away quietly. He didn't want the attention. He didn't want the questions. He just wanted to go home. "Wait," Claire called out as EMTs lifted her onto a stretcher. "Your name?" "I need your name." "It's not important," Marcus said. He turned and walked toward his car, disappearing into the swarm of flashing lights. For the next 2 days, Claire couldn't stop thinking about him. The man who'd risked everything to pull her from the fire. He hadn't asked for money, recognition, or thanks. He had simply vanished. Her father insisted they send a reward, but no one knew who he was. It was as if he'd never existed. Then, during a follow-up interview at the hospital, a firefighter mentioned a name. Marcus Reed. "He's the one who pulled you out before we got there." Claire typed it into a search engine that night. There wasn't much. A community college enrollment record, a few social media posts, an obituary for his mother. But one detail stood out. He worked for a subcontractor of Whitmore Industries, her own company. A chill ran through her. The man who saved her life worked 12-hour shifts loading cargo for a logistics network she controlled. And she had no idea. The next morning, Claire instructed her assistant to track him down. Not for publicity, not for gratitude, but because, for the first time in a long time, something inside her, something human, refused to let the story end there. Marcus was halfway through his 3rd shift of the week when the warehouse manager barked his name over the intercom. "Reed!" "Office." Now, his heart skipped a beat. He hadn't missed any quotas. He hadn't been late. Maybe they were cutting hours again. Maybe they were laying people off. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and trudged toward the small, windowless office at the end of the loading bay. Inside, a man in an expensive navy suit stood beside the manager's desk. His shoes probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. "Mr. Reed?" the man asked, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "I'm Daniel Price, executive assistant to Miss Whitmore." Marcus blinked. "Woo, Claire Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Industries. She would like to speak with you." The manager's expression softened in a way Marcus had never seen. "Take the rest of the shift off, Reed. Consider it excused." Marcus followed Price out of the warehouse and into a waiting black SUV with tinted windows. The interior smelled faintly of leather and power. As they sped toward downtown Los Angeles, Marcus stared out the window, his stomach tightening with every mile. Why would a billionaire CEO want to see him? Did he do something wrong? Was this about the accident? 30 minutes later, they pulled into the underground parking garage of Whitmore Tower, a 50-story monument of glass and steel that dominated the skyline. Price led him through a private elevator, past layers of security, and into a penthouse office that looked more like an art gallery than a workspace. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city. Abstract paintings lined the walls. A polished mahogany desk sat near the center, behind which stood Claire. She looked different from how he remembered her. Not terrified and bloodied, but composed, elegant, commanding. Yet her eyes softened the moment they landed on him. "Marcus?" she said, crossing the room with surprising warmth. "I was starting to think I'd never find you." "You didn't have to," he said, shifting uncomfortably. "I'm just glad you're okay. Just glad I'm okay." She let out a breathless laugh. "You pulled me out of a burning car, and then you disappeared. No interviews, no reward, nothing. Why?" Marcus shrugged. "I didn't do it for a reward." "Then why did you do it?" "Because you were going to die," he said simply. "And I could do something about it." Silence hung between them. Claire had spent her career surrounded by people who wanted something. Money, status, influence. Marcus wanted nothing. It unsettled her and intrigued her all at once. "I owe you my life," she said finally. "And I don't take debts lightly." "You don't owe me anything," he said. "I just did what anyone would do." "That's where you're wrong." She gestured toward a chair. "Please, sit." He hesitated but obeyed. She walked back behind her desk, clasping her hands. "Do you know how many people drove past that accident? How many recorded it on their phones instead of helping? Dozens. But you stopped. You risked your life for a stranger. That means something." "Marcus." He wasn't sure how to respond, so he said nothing. "I want to help you," she continued. "Anything you need. Tuition, a better job, health care for your family. Say the word." "I appreciate it," he said slowly, "but I don't want charity." "It's not charity," she said, leaning forward. "It's gratitude." He shook his head. "With respect, Miss Whitmore, gratitude shouldn't come with a price tag." Her lips parted slightly, a flicker of surprise. Most people groveled in front of her. Most people said yes. Marcus didn't. "Then what do you want?" she asked. He met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "A chance. That's all anyone ever needs." Claire didn't reply, but a small, genuine smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "Then, maybe we can find a way to give you one." The next few weeks passed like a whirlwind. Marcus returned to work, but things felt different now. He started receiving invitations. First to meetings with Whitmore Industries managers, then to observe operations in the company's logistics division. He was even offered a paid mentorship program, which he initially declined until his sister convinced him otherwise. "Marcus," Alina had said, "this isn't a handout, it's a door, and you'd be crazy not to walk through it." Meanwhile, Claire found herself thinking about Marcus more than she expected. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. But it was something deeper. His words echoed in her mind late at night. Gratitude shouldn't come with a price tag. She had built an empire on transactions. Everything in her world was give and take, cost and return. But Marcus's act hadn't been transactional. It was human. That realization gnawed at her. It forced her to question everything. Her company's policies, the conditions of its warehouses, the way it treated the very people whose labor fueled its profits. For the first time in years, Claire attended a facility audit herself. The results were worse than she'd expected: overworked employees, unsafe equipment, ignored complaints. And standing there in the middle of it all, she thought of Marcus again. His hands covered in cuts from breaking the car window, his voice steady as he dragged her from the flames. "Fix this," she told her executive team the next day. "All of it. Now." It didn't take long for rumors to swirl. The CEO's changed, people whispered. She's visiting warehouses, talking about ethics, cutting quotas. Some called it a PR stunt. Others suspected a looming lawsuit. But only a handful knew the truth, that one man's act of selfless bravery had started a quiet revolution inside the company. Marcus noticed changes. Managers treated workers with more respect. Safety protocols were actually enforced. The break room, once a forgotten corner with a broken vending machine, now had working air conditioning and fresh coffee. It wasn't much, but it was something. One evening, as Marcus was leaving the mentorship program, he saw Claire waiting by the lobby doors. "Walk with me," she asked. They strolled through the downtown streets, city lights flickering around them. The air smelled faintly of rain and exhaust. For a while, neither spoke. "You've changed things," she said eventually. He chuckled. "I think you're giving me too much credit." "No," she said firmly. "You reminded me why I started this company in the first place. It wasn't about profits or market share. It was about solving problems and making life better for people. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that." Marcus stopped walking. "Then, maybe saving you wasn't just about pulling you from that car." Their eyes met, and for the first time, Claire felt something shift, something unspoken and unfamiliar. Gratitude had become respect, and respect was slowly becoming something else. Later that night, alone in her penthouse apartment, Claire stared out at the city skyline and wondered if fate was real. Because if it was, then maybe that flaming wreck on the 405 hadn't been an accident at all. Maybe it was the universe forcing two lives, two worlds, to collide. By the time autumn rolled into Los Angeles, the mentorship program had become more than just an opportunity for Marcus. It was a gateway. He spent his days shadowing logistics managers, learning supply chain strategies, and attending boardroom presentations he'd once only read about in business textbooks. But more importantly, he was learning how power worked, how decisions made in glass towers affected the people sweating on warehouse floors. And he was determined to change that. Claire watched his progress closely. She'd never seen someone absorb knowledge so quickly. Within weeks, Marcus was identifying inefficiencies in distribution routes and proposing solutions that no one on her $1 million executive team had noticed. At first, some of them dismissed him. "A warehouse worker doesn't belong in strategic meetings," one VP muttered during a board session. Claire shut it down immediately. "Then maybe our strategic meetings need better people." The more time they spent together, the more Claire and Marcus realized how little they truly knew about each other's worlds. Claire had never ridden a city bus. Marcus had never been in a Michelin star restaurant. Claire's childhood was filled with private tutors and piano recitals. Marcus had learned responsibility by the age of 12, juggling school and part-time jobs to help his mother pay the bills. They were opposites in every imaginable way, and yet, conversations between them felt effortless. One evening after a long day of meetings, Claire suggested they grab dinner. Just something casual, she insisted. No boardrooms, no suits. They ended up at a small Mexican restaurant in South Central, a place Marcus used to visit with his mom on special occasions. The waitress recognized him immediately and hugged him like family. Claire looked out of place at first, her tailored blazer contrasting sharply with the worn-out booths and chip plates. But within minutes, she was laughing, tasting dishes she'd never heard of, and listening to Marcus's stories with genuine interest. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked between bites of carne asada. "Regret what?" "Not taking an easier path. Not leaving all this behind." Marcus smiled faintly. "Every day. And then I remember why I can't. People like me don't get the luxury of walking away. My mom worked herself into an early grave so I could have a shot at something better. If I quit now, all that sacrifice means nothing." Something shifted in Claire's chest. She'd always thought of ambition as a choice, a decision to push harder, reach higher, win more. But for Marcus, ambition wasn't a choice. It was survival. Over the next few weeks, they began to see each other outside of work. At first, it was under the guise of mentorship, a coffee after class, a walk through the logistics hub. But those meetings turned into dinners, and dinners turned into late-night conversations that lasted hours. They talked about everything: music, politics, family, faith. Marcus confessed how he sometimes felt invisible, even when he did everything right. Claire admitted that despite all her power, she often felt alone. Still, not everyone was happy about their growing closeness. It started with whispers in the boardroom. The CEO and the warehouse guy. What will the shareholders think? Then the tabloids picked it up. Whitmore's secret romance, splashed across gossip sites. Claire ignored it at first, but the pressure intensified when the board called an emergency meeting. "You're risking the company's reputation," one director warned. "I'm risking nothing," Claire replied calmly. "Marcus is one of the brightest minds I've ever met, and if you can't see that, then maybe the problem isn't with him." After the meeting, she found Marcus sitting alone in the employee cafeteria, scrolling through the news on his phone. "So," he said with a wry smile, "I guess we're front-page material now." "Let them talk," Claire said. "They don't get to define us." But Marcus shook his head. "They don't have to. The world already has." He turned his phone toward her. Comment sections filled with hate. Gold digger. Corporate agenda. Hayes after her money. She's trying to make herself look good. "Marcus," she began, but he raised a hand. "Do you know how many times I've seen this movie? Poor black man meets rich white woman. People think he's using her. People think she's playing savior. No one believes it's real, do you?" she asked quietly. He sighed. "I want to, God, I want to. But it's not easy ignoring the noise when the noise is the same thing I've heard my whole life." Claire reached for his hand. "Then let's prove them wrong. Together." It wasn't a promise made lightly. From that moment on, they both understood that their story wasn't just about them. It was about what they represented. And if they wanted a chance at something real, they'd have to fight for it. The real test came a month later at the Whitmore Foundation Gala, the company's most public event of the year. Journalists, investors, politicians. The room was a sea of judgment. Claire arrived in a flowing black dress, poised and unflappable. Marcus arrived in a rented tuxedo, his hands trembling despite his composed exterior. Cameras followed their every step as they entered together. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Some were curious, others were disgusted. A few offered polite smiles, but most just stared. Claire squeezed his hand. "You belong here," she whispered. "I'm trying to believe that," he replied. Halfway through the evening, the CEO of a rival company approached them. "Marcus Reed, is it?" he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Tell me, how does it feel to leap from the loading docks to the penthouse?" Marcus forced a smile. "I'm still learning to breathe the thin air." Claire nearly laughed out loud, but the man pressed on. "And what exactly qualifies you to be at an event like this?" "The same thing that qualifies you," Marcus said evenly. "I work hard. I show up, and apparently, I save lives." The man's smirk faltered, and he walked away. Claire's eyes shone with pride. As the night went on, Marcus felt the tension ease. He spoke with board members, shared ideas with department heads, even chatted with journalists who were more intrigued than judgmental. By the time the evening ended, the narrative had begun to shift. He wasn't just the warehouse worker who saved the CEO. He was someone with ideas, intelligence, and ambition, someone worth listening to. Later, As they stood on the balcony overlooking the city lights, Claire turned to him. "I think tonight was a turning point." "Maybe," Marcus said, slipping his hand into hers. "But we've still got a long way to go." She smiled. "Then we'll walk it together." For the first time, Marcus believed her. The weeks following the gala felt like the start of something new. And not just for Marcus and Claire. Inside Whitmore Industries, conversations that had once been taboo were suddenly being had in conference rooms, break areas, and board meetings. Questions about diversity, representation, and systemic barriers weren't brushed aside anymore. Claire made sure of that. She pushed through a mentorship program for low-income employees. She approved scholarship funding for warehouse workers wanting to pursue higher education. She created a new advisory board composed of employees from every level of the company, from janitors to department heads, and made Marcus one of its founding members. But change, as always, didn't come without resistance. Investors grumbled about distractions. Certain executives quietly questioned her leadership. Even some employees didn't know what to make of it. "The boss wants to play social justice warrior now," one senior manager sneered during a staff meeting. Claire didn't flinch. "The boss wants to build a company that deserves the word leader." Marcus faced his own battles. Some of his old co-workers treated him differently now, not with hostility, but with a distance that stung. He wasn't one of them anymore. He wasn't just a guy hauling boxes and swapping jokes on break. He was in meetings with executives, being photographed next to Claire, quoted in press releases. It created a space between them he didn't know how to bridge. One evening, while walking his sister home from school, Marcus confessed his frustration. "It's like I don't belong anywhere anymore," he said. "I'm too important for the warehouse crew, but too ordinary for the boardroom. I don't know where I fit." Alina squeezed his hand. "Maybe you're not meant to fit. Maybe you're meant to build the space where others like you can belong." Her words stuck with him. Meanwhile, Claire was facing her own reckoning at home. Her father, Richard Whitmore, a titan of old money influence and a man who believed in marrying up, not down, had been silent about Marcus since the night of the gala. But that silence broke one crisp Sunday afternoon. "Claire," he said over lunch, his tone deceptively casual, "I've been patient. But this situation has gone far enough." "If by situation you mean the man I'm seeing, then no," she replied coolly. "It's just beginning." "You're jeopardizing everything," Richard snapped. "The company, the family name, our legacy." "I'm building a new legacy," she said. "By dating a warehouse worker. By being with someone who challenges me," she fired back. "Someone who sees me as a person, not a headline." Her father slammed his napkin on the table. "He's beneath you, Claire. And the sooner you accept that, the less damage you'll do." Claire stared at him for a long moment. "I used to think I needed your approval," she said quietly. "I don't anymore." The words were a declaration and a fracture. They spoke less and less after that day, their once daily calls reduced to polite monthly check-ins. But Claire didn't regret it. For the first time in her life, she was choosing something for herself. As for Marcus, he was choosing something too. Encouraged by Claire, he pitched a bold proposal to the advisory board, a pilot project to create a worker-owned logistics subsidiary under Whitmore Industries. Employees would share profits, elect team leaders, and have a direct say in operational decisions. It was risky, ambitious, and unlike anything the company had attempted before. Executives called it idealistic. Investors called it financially irresponsible. Claire called it the future. And so, against the advice of half her board, she approved the project. Marcus would oversee the pilot. The early months were brutal. Many workers were skeptical. Some managers refused to cooperate. Financial forecasts looked grim. But Marcus believed in it. He visited warehouses personally, spoke with employees face to face, listened to their frustrations and ideas. Slowly, trust began to grow. Productivity increased. Injuries decreased. And within 6 months, the pilot was not just surviving, it was outperforming several traditional divisions. The press caught wind of the story. Whitmore Industries reinvents worker model. Read one headline. From warehouse worker to industry innovator. Read another. Interviews poured in. Speaking invitations followed. And through it all, Marcus stayed grounded. Every win was a tribute to the woman who had worked herself to death cleaning offices so he could dream. But success didn't silence the critics. At a shareholder summit, one investor publicly confronted Claire. "Are we a corporation or a charity now?" he demanded. "Because from where I'm standing, this company is bending over backward for a warehouse worker with a sob story." The room fell silent. Claire's voice was calm when she answered. "If building a company that values human dignity is charity, then maybe we should all be more charitable." She paused, letting the weight of her words hang in the air. "And if you think Marcus Reed is just a warehouse worker with a sob story, then you haven't been paying attention." The applause that followed wasn't unanimous, but it was loud enough. Later that evening, Claire and Marcus walked through the quiet streets of downtown. The city was alive around them, neon lights flickering, distant music drifting from rooftop bars. "You didn't have to defend me," he said softly. "I wasn't defending you," she replied. "I was defending what we're building." He smiled. "What? Yes, we," she said, stopping to face him. "Because whether you realize it or not, Marcus, this isn't just my story anymore. It's ours." The air between them shifted. It wasn't just gratitude now. It wasn't just respect. It was love. Quiet, steady, undeniable. They kissed under the glow of a flickering streetlight, and for a moment, the noise of the world faded away. There were no boardrooms, no comment sections, no judgment. Just two people who had collided in the unlikeliest of ways. And were now building something neither had thought possible. That night, as Marcus lay awake staring at the ceiling of his modest apartment, he realized something profound. Saving Claire from that burning SUV hadn't just changed her life. It had changed his. It had given him purpose. It had given him hope. And maybe, just maybe, it had given him a future worth fighting for. 2 years passed, but neither of them felt like time had moved the way it used to. Marcus had gone from being a warehouse laborer, no one noticed, to the head of Whitmore Industries' most innovative division. A worker-driven logistics model, now studied by business schools and emulated by competitors. Claire, once known for being a ruthless corporate shark, had evolved into something far more respected. A visionary leader who had redefined what power could look like when wielded with empathy instead of ego. And together, they had become a story the world couldn't stop talking about. Their faces appeared on magazine covers. They were invited to speak at global conferences. News anchors framed them as proof that modern capitalism still had a heart. But the real story, the one no headline could capture, was quieter and deeper. It lived in the small moments. The late nights they spent sketching plans on napkins. The shared laughter in the back of cheap diners. The way Marcus still drove the same old Civic, even though he could now afford a fleet of luxury cars. The way Claire still carried the scorched watch she'd been wearing the day he pulled her from the wreckage. But for all the external change, the greatest transformation had been internal. Marcus had stopped apologizing for where he came from. Claire had stopped trying to prove she belonged. Together, they had learned that love, real love, wasn't about fixing or saving each other. It was about standing side by side, building something neither could build alone. And yet, even in their happiness, the world continued to test them. One morning, a viral video surfaced online, a montage of their story edited with cynical commentary. "Fairy tales don't fix racism," a voiceover mocked. "This isn't progress. It's a PR stunt." The video exploded across social media, reigniting debates they thought they had left behind. People questioned Marcus's motives again. Others accused Claire of using him as a shield. Old wounds reopened. "Does it ever stop?" Marcus asked one night, staring out at the city from their apartment balcony. Claire stepped beside him, her hand finding his. "No," she said softly. "But that's how you know what we're doing matters." He turned to her. "Do you ever regret it? Any of it?" She shook her head. "Not for a second. Do you?" He smiled faintly. "Only that I didn't find you sooner." It was in moments like this, when the noise of the world felt overwhelming, that Marcus remembered why he'd started down this path in the first place. It wasn't for recognition. It wasn't even for success. It was for people like his mother, who had died believing she was invisible. For workers who still clocked in day after day, convinced no one saw them. For every person who had ever been told they didn't belong. That purpose drove him as Whitmore Logistics launched a new initiative, one that offered stock options to every warehouse employee. From the janitors to the forklift drivers. It wasn't charity. It was ownership. And when the first dividend checks went out months later, Marcus personally visited the Inglewood warehouse, where he'd started. The faces that once looked at him with skepticism now greeted him with hugs and gratitude. "You proved it could be done," one worker said, tears in his eyes. "You made them see us." "No," Marcus replied. "We made them see us." Back in the city, Claire faced a different kind of reckoning. Her father, who had once vowed never to accept Marcus, asked to meet him privately. They met in the study of the Whitmore estate, a room Marcus had avoided for years. "I was wrong," Richard said, pouring them both a glass of whiskey. "About you, about all of it," Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What changed?" "I watched you build something out of nothing," Richard said. "And I watched my daughter become happier than I've ever seen her." That's not something a father ignores. It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was close enough. Marcus accepted the glass. They drank in silence, two men from different worlds finally finding common ground. Months later, Marcus and Claire stood together in front of a small crowd on a stage built in the middle of a brand new distribution facility. It was the grand opening of the Bridges Center, a training and mentorship hub for disadvantaged youth who wanted careers in logistics, entrepreneurship, and leadership. The name was no accident. It symbolized everything they had become: a bridge between privilege and poverty, power and purpose, fear and hope. As Marcus stepped up to the microphone, he looked out over the crowd, workers, executives, journalists, students, and felt a lump form in his throat. "When I started here," he began, "I was just a guy loading boxes. I didn't think anyone saw me. I didn't think anyone ever would. But then, one day, everything changed. Not because I wanted fame or fortune, but because I saw someone who needed help, and I did the only thing I knew how to do. I reached out." He paused, his eyes finding Claire in the front row. "What I didn't know was that reaching out that day would change my life. It would lead me here, not as a savior, not as a symbol, but as proof that no one is invisible. Every person in this room matters. Every person deserves to be seen." The applause was thunderous, but Marcus barely heard it. He was too busy watching Claire climb the steps to stand beside him. She took his hand and faced the crowd. "Marcus saved my life," she said simply. but more importantly, he taught me how to live it. He showed me that leadership isn't about control. It's about connection. It's about believing in people, even when the world doesn't. And together, that's exactly what we plan to keep doing. Later that night, long after the speeches and the cameras and the handshakes, Marcus and Claire walked through the empty halls of the new center. The lights were dim, the silence comforting. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked. "Every day," he admitted. "It's crazy to think everything started with a crash." She smiled. "Maybe it wasn't a crash. Maybe it was a collision. The universe's way of throwing us together." He laughed softly. "Best accident of my life." They stopped in the middle of the hallway, hands entwined, and for a moment neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Their story. The worker and the CEO, the savior and the saved. The two worlds that collided and refused to drift apart had become more than just theirs. It was a testament to what was possible when courage met compassion, when love challenged prejudice, when people refused to accept the lines the world tried to draw between them. Marcus kissed her forehead and whispered the same words he had spoken the night he pulled her from the flames. "You're safe now." "Only this time," she smiled and answered, "we both are."